Our next speaker is Keith Myers, and Keith Myers is the co-founder of LHC Group, and he served as chairman and CEO from 1994 until the company was acquired last year from UnitedHealth for $5.4 billion. Mr. Myers helped establish the LHC Group as a single freestanding home health agency in rural St. Landry Parish, Louisiana. And from this foundation, he and his wife Ginger, a nurse at the time, built what would become one of the largest and highest quality in-home health care providers in the U.S., with over 29,000 employees supporting over 900 agencies in 38 states, including the District of Columbia. Keith took LHC Group public in 2005. So the last 18 years of the journey was spent as a public company, and over that stretch, he took sales from $100 million to over $2 billion, and then he was acquired last year. And so I've been really looking forward to this presentation and conversation with Keith because he's kind of one of the few individuals that led a company from nothing up to going public. And when he went public, I think it was around $100 million in revenue, about $9 million in earnings. And so I think there's a lot of entrepreneurial lessons, a lot of small business lessons, a lot of scale questions that we can get answers to, and I think it's going to be a great next hour or so with Keith Myers. So thank you, Keith.
Thanks, Ian. Appreciate that. And a location here in Coeur d'Alene, by the way, so if anybody gets sick, we have nurses that can take care of you. Well, I have to say it's really exciting and stimulating to be here. I was sharing with Ian earlier, you know, after being in the CEO seat for that many years, the last 5 weren't a lot of fun. You know, when we got to that size, I felt like a punching bag most of the time. But what I really missed was just the ability to be entrepreneurial. And so to be back on your side of the table and be here is just really exciting to me. It takes me back to the old days. So I appreciate the opportunity to share our story with you. I doubt that there's anything I can teach anyone in this room for sure, so I'm not going to try. I'm just going to tell you what we think is a cool story and how we did it. This is really a Mayberry story. So this little town, Palmetto, Louisiana, will probably get Googled more today than it has in the last 20 years. But that's where we come from, Ginger and I both. Nothing to do with the success, but just a cool story. Ginger and I were first boyfriend and girlfriend when she was 12 and I was 14. Now, we broke up. We didn't stay together from 12 and 14, you know, but we ended up, marrying. But we both come from this little small town, and we were both raised in a family with little means, very little. My parents were farmers in Palmetto, and I grew up on a farm, and growing up I thought that's what I would do. Ginger's dad worked for the state highway department and was a cattle rancher. Ginger went on to become a nurse. I had opportunities to leave the farm and work in the food industry for a while. And it was in that job that I met Ron Nixon, who's in the back of the room, and you'll hear from Ron shortly with Catalyst Group. And Ron and I met at that place. He was doing work with the same company that the people that I was working for, but in a different role. But Ron spotted something in me back at that young age, and boy, what a blessing that you did, Ron. But he said this to me. He said, I don't know what you're going to do in life. And he said, but if you ever find yourself wanting to go in business and you need financing, call me. I remember that. So now let's fast forward. 1993, this little town of Palmetto, I was a city councilman in Palmetto at the time. No big deal, 183 people. Everybody gets to be a city councilman in Palmetto. But there were these 4 people that you see photos of. Miss Olivia King, Willie Semier, Lucille Semier, and Amelia Johnson. These were people that were constituents in the, community, of course, but they were like family to us in a small community like that. In 1993, they were faced with a situation where their adult children who had moved out to the cities to get jobs were worried about their parents, and they wanted to place these 4 individuals in a nursing home. The kids had got together and talked about it, and they thought it would be really good if they put them all in the same nursing home so they could visit. So everybody was happy about that except these 4 elderly people who didn't want to go in a nursing home. Ginger was a nurse. Ginger's a nurse, and she was the only nurse in this community. So the mayor of the little town came to Ginger and said, Ginger, we need you to volunteer before and after you go to the hospital every day to care for these 4 people so they don't have to go in a nursing home. Ginger didn't ask any questions. She did that. And I love this picture of Ginger with the hat and all. I mean, this is what Ginger always was. She's like a Florence Nightingale, complete patient advocate. So she did that, and it worked out so great for these 4 neighbors of ours that they started telling everyone when they went to church and everything. And other elderly people were showing up at the little town hall in this community wanting to sign up for this service. They thought it was a city service, and that it didn't exist. So because of that need, we applied for a home health license the next year in 1994, and opened a Medicare certified agency in 1994. Back then, home health was not a for-profit business. Like most healthcare back then, it was cost reimbursed, so you could not make a profit. You would record all your allowable expenses, report it to the government every year, and they would reimburse your expenses. So it was all community service. There was no intent to build a business back then. So I tell that story because, so we really believe that in business, I believe that in addition to making profit, we have to add some value to the people that we're serving, whatever it is. That's just something that I believe strongly in. So I'm fast forwarding a little bit now. Let's get to 1997. And the Balanced Budget Act of '97. I promise you I'll get out the history lesson in a minute and get to more cool stuff, but it's all important. When that law passed and home health was going to be prospectively paid, there was an opportunity to make a profit if you could manage your expenses efficiently and survive the transition to prospective payment. There was no incentive to be efficient before prospective payment, but on the flip of a switch, in 1998, home health became prospectively paid. And the thinking in the industry then was that everyone is going to go out of business, that you can't possibly survive. We didn't waste any time thinking about that. That's when I reached out to Ron, and I told him what was going to happen. We got together and we started building a model and forecasting how we could provide care at a predictable cost and comparing that to what we would be reimbursed. And if we were disciplined and if we had the metrics and concurrent management, we said we can really be successful at this. So that's what led us down a path. That's where Ron came back into the picture and supported us. But this handwriting, you see, it's all about helping people, is Ginger's handwriting. And this is such a cool story. The first CFO we had was a CFO, and he liked marketing as well. He's a friend of Ron and I's. He brought in an advertising firm, and he said, well, the first thing you need if we can go in this company is you need a big name, and you need a big power statement. So he came in with all of these different campaigns, and there were things like superior quality, just like real dominant, we're the best in the business and all. And Ginger was very frustrated about the whole conversation, and she was thinking back to how this all started, And she, she didn't speak, she wrote on that on a napkin, that's still her handwriting, and slid it across the table, and then walked out of the room to go see patients. And what Ginger was saying is, who are you fooling? You know, this is really about helping people. This is not just about financial engineering. That became part of our culture at LHC Group. And why that's important, the 29,000 employees that Ian mentioned, they're all caregivers. The majority of them are nurses and therapists and physicians, and they all get their training because they want to help people and serve people. And so having that inside your culture, it has been incredibly valuable to us and has been one of our, if not our greatest differentiator. Employee turnover is, we lead the industry in low turnover, and it's all because of that culture, I believe. So now let's get into the into what we do and how we're able to succeed. So the one thing that that Ron and I agreed upon up front was, well, it's the Peter Drucker statement, right? What gets measured gets managed. So, and hope was never a strategy with us. So we started measuring everything in the business on a real-time basis. So we knew how many, when the number of patients we admitted every day, not every week, but every day, we could project how many visits that would result in and how much revenue that would generate, and we would forecast the cost. And we did it for every location, but we went deeper than that. We did it for every clinician, which back then was a tight wire balance, you know, because everything had been cost reimbursed. So even Ginger, when Ginger first was introduced with the idea that we were going to measure productivity and performance on every one of the nurses and therapists she had, she just thought that was, if they ever found out, everyone's going to quit. You can't do that with healthcare workers. And my God, look at where we are today. You know, everything gets measured. But we did that as we built the company, and we never walked back from it. We measured the clinicians, but we also measured G&A, and we had the same metrics for G&A, and from 2005, when we went public, all the way through the end, we were always at or above 2% lower G&A costs than our next closest comp in the market. And so that gave us a big advantage. So these were the 6 things that we decided we had to measure to be successful. People, service, quality, efficiency, growth, and ethics. So, you know, in people, the productivity on every person, every day, every person in the company. Service, that's really patient satisfaction. And, you know, what do we hear about patient satisfaction from each individual clinician that's delivering care? Quality, those are outcomes. Do patients get readmitted into the hospital? And it shouldn't be a surprise. Some nurses, depending on, or therapists, on how they deliver care, the individual teams have different rehospitalization rates. So harvesting best practices, the teams that have the best rates, harvesting those best practices and sharing that with the other team members who didn't have as good as stats. Efficiency speaks for itself. Growth, we would project growth based on census and the competitors in a market. We build it into the budget, forecast it, and then set that as a target. People would hit it. And last is ethics, and which is really compliance and is doing the right thing and following the rules. So, so we did all of that. Now fast forward, 2005. You know, quite a journey from 1994 to 2005. But as you know, as Ian said, we were at you know, relatively small. But we went public in 2005. We were 6.5 times oversold We didn't know if anyone would be interested in a home health stock. It wasn't very popular back then. But we went public with with that footprint and that revenue, and that really put us in a position where we could accelerate growth. Home health was a tough business to be in for those who did not make the transition to prospective pay successfully. So we were buying a lot of businesses for, many of them we were just taking over the businesses because they were failing and they wanted to have jobs for their employees. Hospitals around the country had, about 50% of hospitals had home health agencies. Almost all of them were losing money, but they didn't want to give up the service. So we developed a model to joint venture with them. We went in, we would take over the operation, we would pay them money for a business that was underwater, and they would retain a third, we would buy 2/3 was the model, and then we would operate it under the hospital's name. So for the community, they thought that we were part of the hospital system. We wore their logos and all that. That was about 50% of our business, and so that was a differentiating strategy that served us really well. But this is where everything changed. When we started seeing the model and we saw on those 6 pillars how we were outperforming everyone in the industry, we started thinking that if we're gonna go nationwide with this, we have to have a way to make success in all of these 6 pillars even more predictable. So we started harvesting all of the best practices. So when you admit a patient, a nurse goes out and assesses a patient, and the therapist and the physician, and they'll decide, well, this patient needs these interventions. You could have an agency 10 miles, 20 miles down the road in another community, a different team, and the care plan they would put together for a patient with the exact same diagnosis was not even close to this one. It might be double the services. And you start thinking about why, how does that, how can that be? So we started drilling into what they actually did when they were with the patient. What were the interventions? We harvested all that from our own from our own top performing agencies. And then we got data nationally from home health agencies. There are 12,000 home health agencies in the country. We could get data from all of those to see which ones had the best outcomes. And then we could look at their cost report data to see what their interventions were. We put all that into a model, and where nurses could go out now and admit a patient, put in the diagnosis, and we would give them data that said what interventions produce the best outcomes at the lowest resource allocation. And the clinicians can choose to use it or not. It wasn't mandatory. It was just information for them. At first, the utilization was maybe 30%. Maybe 30% of the clinicians would say, yeah, I like that, I believe it, I'll use that. The other 70% would do something different. Over time, we started comparing the 2 groups, and everyone got on board, and now it's, it's rare that people deviate from the model very much. So we had that, we had it patented. And once we had buy-in, then we had, we could predict cost. We could get into value-based arrangements, like commit to certain outcomes. We knew what our cost would be and what our probability would be for success. So of everything that we did, after we went public, I would say that was the game changer for us. Home health changed. This was in 2009 was the first iteration. Home health changed over the years, and so we updated the patent in 2023. And so that's something that you might not hear a lot about LHC, but it's super important. now I'll turn to Washington, D.C. I'm going to take a really big flip. So my dad loved politics. I hated politics. I didn't like anything about it. But two of my political mentors were Billy Tozan, who was a congressman from Louisiana. When he left Congress, he was the CEO of the pharma industry. And then Senator John Breaux, who was the U.S. Senator from Louisiana. So I went to them for advice when we were investing more in the company and growing, because home health had a pretty bad reputation on Capitol Hill. There were 12,000 agencies, probably a third of those were abusing the system, overcharging, and so the perception was that the home health industry was rant with fraud and abuse. And they said, you're going to have to get involved in Washington, D.C. We were the biggest home health provider in the country. If you want to see home health grow, you're going to have to clean it up. I said, well, what am I going to do to clean it up? I said, well, the National Association represented all 12,000 agencies, including the third who were bad actors. And their recommendation was to start a new association that screened members and had only the efficient, ethical operators, and expose the bad actors and partner with lawmakers to clean up home health and have it be more efficient. So I did that. So we formed, I signed the articles, we formed a new association. I recruited 12 other colleagues in the industry that ran really good agencies, and we started lobbying differently in Capitol Hill. Prior to that, the home health industry, their game plan was a couple of times a year, they'd bring busloads of elderly people in wheelchairs and with walkers and walk them up and down the halls and try to get the sympathy vote. But people were being more fiscally focused in Washington, D.C., and that wasn't winning the day anymore. So, all of the, I would say to a large extent, all of the successful events we've had in the industry to grow it since probably 2010 forward have been from that. We just we opened up the book to home health on how they operated, and differentiated bad actors from good actors, and then cleaned it up from a compliance standpoint, and that helped the industry rise. So part of the operating model became the DC strategy. It wasn't just something you did if you had time. It was really part of our strategy to grow revenue. And then, so 2022, and you all know about that event. I'm sure it's easy to look up. What most people don't know, though, is I just mentioned Senator John Breaux. We partnered with payers. If you know how healthcare works, providers do one of two things: they partner with payers or they fight payers. In our case, we never agreed with payers on their rates or everything they did, but that's where our reimbursement came from. So being at the table with them is a place we always wanted to be. United was one of the toughest to deal with. Probably, I think it was around 2010 that Senator John Breaux, that I mentioned earlier, he had retired from Congress. He was a lobbyist, and one of his clients was UnitedHealth. And he was on our board of directors, and we were just having woes with them. And he said, well, let's go up there and talk to them. I want to bring you up there. You need to meet them. They're really good people. So for 15 years, I went back and forth, to Minneapolis, and they got to understand us as not just another home health vendor, but how we operated. They knew about our patents. They knew all of those things. And we never anticipated that they would grow the Optum segment to where it was. But you know, when the day came that they now wanted to start leveraging their bringing down cost of care, and providing care in the home is one of the best ways to do that. And patients don't want to go. No one wants to go to a hospital. So if they can be cared for at home, and that's how we had the dialogue with them, and what led to us eventually coming together. It's been a fantastic partnership so far. I really mean that. For our team, we get to do what we do, and we have a strategy for managed care. Every year, managed care picks up more and more volume, and we were really faced with a situation where we were price takers, and there was nothing that we could do about it. When you get at the table, now we're part of them, so they see what the resource needs are, and we have, instead of debate, we solve problems and move forward and serve more patients. So today, I mentioned early on, so that's been the story of LHC. It's been exciting. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. But I have to say that, but being in a room with all of you takes me back to 1994, 1995, and those were the really exciting times. But I wouldn't trade this experience for nothing either. And here's how I'll wrap this up. All of the things I talked about that Ron and I did on a legal pad first, the concurrent management and measuring every aspect of the business at every location every day is the only way that we could get here. And I watched thousands of providers as the chair of the partnership, and just being involved in the industry, just go in another direction. And most of the time, it's driven by clinicians who believe that if you measure efficiency in healthcare, that you're doing a disservice to patients. And I think we proved that that's just not true. Waste is waste. Here's an example. This is telling on Ginger a little bit. One of the first things that I proposed to Ginger when we started going on this path was that we needed to get odometer readings on all of the clinicians. And Ginger said, "What are you saying? Are you saying that they're lying about their mileage?" She really said that. And I said, well, I mean, I don't know, but here's one nurse that's driving 3 times, turning in 3 times the miles of another nurse that's seeing the same patients in a similar zip code. Don't know how to explain that. When we started getting the odometer readings at first, half, and then I mean, Ginger was blown away by that. But then you can just go on and on. I mean, when you see nurses that get outside of the model, or that are providing twice the number of visits as someone else, all of those things, but we lived through a time where that was not okay to where it was okay. But healthcare is just like any other business. If you don't measure everything and manage every aspect of the business every day, you can't be successful. No secret to all of you. You all know that. But through this experience in healthcare, it's been quite interesting. So let me wrap up with this. So today, what I was sharing with Ron and Jim in the back. Today, what's exciting for me is I'm now on the other side of the fence. I'm with all of you again, so I'm able to invest. And retirement is not in my DNA. As I've said a long time, my dad would be ashamed of me if he was alive and saw that I ever just hung it up and sat on a beach somewhere. But I'm still involved with LHC. So we don't have a board of directors at LHC anymore. In many ways, I guess I'm the one board member for LHC. But Josh Profit, who is the CEO in the seat now, was with the company 17 years, blessed to have a great guy who was ready to step in the seat. He's an attorney and an accountant, and he's already managing other Optum assets. I mean, they're leveraging our management team. With Optum, I'm enjoying the senior advisory role with them. Optum's like a fast-growing company. A lot of young people and changing seats a lot. Much smarter than I am in a lot of things. There's some things that I can share with them that things were painful lessons to me, and maybe I can help them not have to do those same things. I think that's my role. Catalyst. Ron and I have been together so long, so I'm an investor and a partner in Catalyst, but haven't been able to be very involved in Catalyst because of the LHC role, so really enjoying that. A-Game is Jim Painter's in the back with A-Game. A-Game's an interesting one for me. New Game. It's a hydration drink company that I was presented an opportunity to join their board, and so I'm an investor and a board member with A-Game, and it's exciting to learn something new, in a different area. And I'm still a board member for the Partnership for Quality Home Health Care. I'll never walk away from home health. I'm a lifetimer in that. But that's our story. So let me just open it up for Q&A.
Yeah, maybe I'll start with a couple questions, and then Sean will have a mic as well. And just make sure you ask the question into the mic, because this is being recorded and we want to be able to hear you ask your question. I guess maybe I'll lead off with you're the CEO of LHC Group the entire ride, from the start to when you merged or were acquired with UnitedHealth. I mean, what was that like? I mean, did you maybe go through, to go from hustle to scale like that? I think it's very rare not only to have the success that you had, but also to have the same leader in that seat, because that means that leader has had to evolve, quite a bit. From when it was in the late 90s to where it was, just last year, And so maybe just talk about your maturation as a leader and what allowed you to stay in that seat for as long as you did.
Well, I've always had to work hard. I learned that on the farm, so I never had an easy route to anything. But with LHC, I think it's the fact that I'm an operator. You can probably tell I'm not a salesman. I'm not a great public speaker. I'm an operator, and so when I think of home health agencies that have failed, some of the larger ones, I think they put people that had name recognition, a lot of name recognition, into a CEO seat to be able to attract new business and to grow. But the fundamentals weren't being managed, and so long term, the business, all it takes is a change in regulation or reimbursement to change the whole game. And can you work your way through that puzzle to develop new metrics and find a new way to win? That has been the demise of a lot of companies in home health. So I think that's just it. Hard work and managing the business.
And how important would you say was your board, through the growth and maturation of the company as an asset?
Really, really huge. And so let's talk about that a minute. Our board, we had no yes people on our board. So essentially, Ron was my first board member. He was the investor and finances of Catalyst. But as we selected board members, that was the one thing we guarded against. We wanted board members that were active, that rolled up their sleeves, that did work on committees. We never went to board members who had name recognition, and we just wanted to use their photo and have them on the board. And now, I believe that so strongly when, if I get, asked to be involved in anything, and well, a good example is A-Game. When Jim approached me, I said, so what are you looking for? If you want to use my bio, I'm not your guy. I mean, because I want to know. I want to know how it works. You know, I want to give you my opinion, and I really think that was a huge differentiator for us. Because you know, if I mean, even the decision to merge with Optum, you know, board members, if you have the wrong board members, or management team, they don't want to give up that role, you know, because it could change their life. So having the right management team and the right board is important for when those big decisions have to be made also.
Anybody have any questions? Just raise your hand and Sean will come to you with the mic.
Hi, thanks. Great presentation. I'm curious about the decision of when to sell or to merge. It looks like from a map that you have a lot of greenfield opportunity. You could have continued doing acquisitions, and that you may be in inning 4 or 5 in a 9-inning game. What prompted you to do what you did when you did it?
Yeah, so it was the recognizing that we didn't have ample influence on rates. So we were price takers. And, you know, post-COVID, labor costs were going up at a much higher rate than reimbursement. And we got increases from the Medicare side. You would get that. But the Medicare, the percent of our business that was traditional Medicare, government pay, was decreasing every year. And the managed care penetration was increasing. And there were so many home health agencies that were out there, I mean, small ones that didn't know what their cost was, that would accept a rate from a managed care company and that had them operating, you know, at a deficit, and they would go out of business a couple of years and somebody else would pop up, and there was no way for us to convince big payers like Humana or United that there was something, we had better quality. But to be honest, I mean, it's a business, so they only care about quality if the government cares about quality when they assess their operating results and, you know, and their effect on the population they're managing. And the results weren't meaningful enough for the regulators to step in, so therefore we were price takers. And we saw that trend. We looked at it in the boardroom for quite a while, and you know, we're fortunate to have the relationship with United, to where we could have that conversation, and they were ready to do something. I'd really like to say that we had it planned all along, which is why I went to Minnesota to start with, but that would not be true. So that was just luck.
Thanks. Good morning. I'm interested how you got buy-in from the clinicians. It sounds like the industry was a bit of the Wild West, at least in the 90s, and then you guys brought this whole new level of accountability, tracking odometers, like doing stuff that they were not used to, and it sounds like that would be really difficult, especially if they could opt to work for a competitor or just not subject themselves to that level of accountability that you guys were requiring. So interested in how you got everyone to buy in on that. That's a really good question. So we were always very, very active in the national association. So prior to starting the partnership, there was a national association that was essentially everybody who was a home health operator was in that. So we would go to conferences and have different people on our management team in different areas that would share our best practices with other operators at those conferences. So instead of hoarding the information, if we shared it with them, then, you know, it was more likely that they would say, wow, that's a good idea, we're going to start doing that too. Because we did, when we started tracking all these things, you know, in the first few years, odometer readings, you know, and verifying that you actually went where you said you were going to go. it was just an environment where clinicians were almost like, I don't know, almost like nuns or something. Like what are you doing questioning a nurse? Are you saying that they're lying? Are you saying being dishonest? So we did fight some of that, but that's what we did. We decided to share the best practices and change the whole industry. One of the things an example of that, which was pretty big, if you look back in the history of the industry, there was a time when the whole focus was on fraud and abuse and bad actors and all. And unlike hospitals and all, home health agencies just didn't have formal corporate compliance programs. Didn't even have a plan, believe it or not. So we hired Deloitte and Touche to come in and build a plan for us that was specific to home health. And then once we got that and we put it in place, then we took it and actually the guy who's the CEO of the CEO in CEO seat now, Josh Profit, was our compliance officer back then. He's an attorney that was at Alston and Byrd and came over to us. But we sent Josh out on the road to all the conferences around the country, sharing the work from Deloitte and Touche. And you know, our thinking there was we had an image problem in Washington, D.C., so if we helped clean up the industry, I mean, it would benefit everyone, but we were a public company, so it would, you know, it raise the perception in the industry, and that worked for us. It also helped on the acquisition side. You know, we were viewed as even though we were larger than everyone, we were at the table and not, you know, not acting in a bully fashion or anything. So when people decided to sell, we would get the call most of the time. It's a good question, but that was an important step.
Just curious on your comment regarding the bar board membership. So part one is, how do you find those board members that you know will be engaged, but then also are not yes men, so to speak? And then the follow-up to that is, how do you support, I guess, that kind of engagement on the board, so people willing to say, no, you know what, Keith, I think you're off your rocker?
Yeah, so so the first part of that is I never selected board members. I've always operated as a team of equals. So like in the boardroom, I was the chairman of the board, but I didn't leverage that. So we had an executive committee. You know, Ron was always involved in that. Dan Wilford, who was another board member that was one of the founders of Volunteer Hospitals of America, just such a great mentor. But when we had to make those, I mean, that decision or other important decisions that sometimes a management team certainly could make it, I just didn't do it. You know, I wanted as much input as I could get, because I wanted to be as sure as I could about making the best decision, and that's, I mean, that's really important. Because I have seen, just in our industry, numerous management teams that had huge influence on picking who the board was. So essentially, there was no governance. The management team could get away with just about anything. We didn't, you know, I didn't want that at all, ever. And look, honestly, I'll mention Ron again. If you're going to live in his world, you're not going to have it anyway. So, you know, so we were never tempted with that. Was there a second part to that?
Yeah, just on the board and making decisions, like how do you encourage people to push back on the process?
So hiring the right people who are wired that way to start with, I think is important. Because if someone's unwilling to do it or uncomfortable, or you kind of size that up in the interview process. But then after that, you just keep saying it over and over. I mean, you say it in every board meeting, or if you if something's being discussed and it's about to come to a vote, and if I would sense dead air in the room before you allow a vote to happen, you just really push on people to speak up, because you can tell when it's too quiet, you feel that something's wrong. Like somebody is going to say yes because they don't want to offend someone else who feels strongly about it. So I think the role of the chairman is to pull that out.
Hey, quick question. Sure. Thanks for the presentation. I think it was really genius to put in the quality metrics like you guys did. That was, at the time, back in that day, that was very novel. Could you share a little bit about, with healthcare, culture is such a huge, huge issue in each clinic, each home, each hospital. Can you share a little bit about what you learned of how you maintained your culture from starting very small, going public, and then going through an acquisition? Because I know a lot of times in healthcare, businesses can maintain a great culture up to a point, and especially maybe with going public, but especially going through an acquisition. And I know you valued your team members highly. How do you protect them in a way, I don't know if protect's the right word, but safeguard them through an acquisition so that you maintain that and there's not a bit of a mass exodus once that happens?
Yeah, so first of all, I'd say, there's manipulation won't work. I mean, you can't fool anybody into into buying the culture, especially like with, let's just talk about start at the end, with the merger. Through the relationship and all the years that we knew United, they got to know our organization, and they saw the culture. And then one of the things that they wanted from us, one of the things on the short list was culture. So on the Optum side, they grew a great company and grew it really fast. A lot of talented people, but what they see that's not there is the culture that they wanted to have. So, subtly, right? Subtly, you can't affect this overnight. But one of the things that I take as a responsibility is to try to bring the LHC culture as much as possible into that, into the Optum environment. The culture is, I think the biggest part of it is, well, two things: communication and transparency. You have to have them both, and you certainly don't want to have communication without transparency, because that's manipulation, and people are smart. They're gonna see that really quick. And I hope y'all don't get tired of these old stories, but I want to give credit where credit's due. So one of the things I still do 3 times a week is early in the mornings, I'll put thoughts together of whatever it is. It's not like anything specific about the business, but it's just in general, why we do what we do, or, and send that out to every employee in the company. Back in the first agency we opened outside of the state of Louisiana, way back in 2000, I guess, was Mississippi Baptist Hospital in Jackson, Mississippi. And the CEO there was a gentleman by the name of Jerry Cotton. Great man, very spiritual, great operator, had the whole package. I was lucky enough to be mentored by him for a few years, because they were our largest hospital partner. And one day, when I was visiting with him, he said, you know, this company's going to be much bigger than you can imagine. And I said, oh, thank you, or something. He said, no, don't brush me off. He said, I'm serious about this. He said, y'all are great at managing the metrics. Y'all are on top of the business. He goes, that's never going to be a problem for you. He said, your problem is going to be culture and losing the culture as the company grows. He said, now, I don't know how this will apply to you, but let me show you something I do. He would wake up every morning, and he was a prayerful man, so he would have his prayer time, and then he would handwrite some message to all of the employees of Baptist Health System. And he would bring that handwritten note into his assistant, and she would type it up, and then she would fax it to all of the Baptist hospitals, and they would make copies and distribute it to all the employees at every hospital. And he said, I think you should think of something like this. I said, I wouldn't know what to say. He said, well, I'll send you mine, and you can use mine. So he started doing that, and then, you know, we did the fax, and then when we had email, we did email, and after about 5 years, he said, you know, I'm getting long in the tooth. He said, it's time for you to start doing some of these. I want you to do 1 a week, and I'm going to do 2 a week. And then I went to 2 a week, and him 1 a week. And then at the end, he was distributing mine until he retired. I still do that, you know. And at the end of it, I invite every employee that if they have any issue that's not being resolved and they feel like they want to reach out to me, and they have my email address. And now, culturally, when you put that in place and everybody knows it's there, I don't get emails because everyone knows that they can send that email directly to me. But you know, the question about how do you maintain the culture, you know, you have to do those kind of things. It has to be hardwired, and it's no BS. If they send the email to me, Barry, who's in the back of the room, is my assistant. Barry gets it immediately. I get it immediately. And then we share it with the rest of the team. Josh, the CEO now, gets it. HR gets it. And they look into it. But no one goes out and punishes anyone that reached out because of the problem.
We have time for one more.
Thank you for the interesting talk, very interesting. I guess I really had 2 questions, so I'll try and speak quickly. The first one was near the beginning of your presentation, you talked about how I guess the home health care system in the US changed, the law changed in the 1990s to allow home health care providers to have a profit, which that wasn't the case before. That only applied to home health care, right? It didn't apply to other kinds of health care.
Hospitals were cost reimbursed. Hospitals went to prospective payment before home health did, but I can't remember what year.
All right.
Maybe in the 80s, but at one point, all health care was cost reimbursed.
Yeah, it's just interesting. Yeah, I mean, I guess, never mind. I was just wondering to myself why that didn't seem to have an effect elsewhere in healthcare. But I guess that's kind of a too broad question. Now, the other question I was going to ask was about, you gave the interesting example of the odometer readings for your staff as an example of the maxim, if you can't manage it unless you can measure it. So I was wondering if you could give some other examples like that of how you managed to improve, reduce costs, from things that people weren't quantifying beforehand.
Yeah, so centralized procurement. Believe it or not, that was a war. You know, so there was a point where every local agency decided what vendors they're going to buy from. they decided what price they were going to pay, and then we would roll up the financials, and if we didn't like the way it looked in an area, you couldn't really do much right away. And when we moved to centralizing, every time we'd go to a different department and centralize it, it was a heavy lift. And it's just a really great question. What allowed us to do it successfully, I'm convinced, is culture, is building and maintaining trust with all employees. They might not like it, but they knew we meant well. Like we're not bad people. We're not. You know, it's not an overreach, and we would give them the data. We'd tell them why we're doing it. We'd say, here's what you're paying. Here's what we're paying at all other locations. So if you share that with them and you bring them along, we think of them essentially as partners. And the transparency, when I talk about that, it's that. Like we try to never do anything, make a change, without our employees knowing why we're doing it. You're never going to have 100% consensus and everybody happy, but at least if they know why you're doing it and they see the data, you bring them in enough. And you know, and back to the board selection, you have to select a board that buys into that too. You know, if you bring someone into the boardroom that comes from a different place, that believes that, you know, the people in the field don't need to know anything, and like that kind of culture, you know, then it's going to affect how the management team thinks.